If you walked into Moreno's kitchen 10 years ago, you'd think we were one big, happy family. The sign said, "Family owned since 1993, and my kids love telling people, our mom built this place from scratch." But what they didn't say, and what nobody saw, was how many things I quietly gave up just so they could keep saying that. I've paid every single bill in this house since my husband passed. Electricity, gas, water, garbage, insurance, rent, everything. If it had a due date, it was mine. If it had interest, I paid it. And if someone needed help, Carlos with his student loan, Miguel with his car repair, Isabella with yet another therapy app subscription, I pulled out my checkbook. Always. Vacations? Never took one. Retirement? I told myself I'd think about it next year. My knees? One of them's bone on bone now, but I still mop the kitchen floor on Sundays because nobody else will. I ran Moreno's kitchen like a ship. Tight, tired, but afloat. Customers came back not because the sign said, "Family owned," but because they knew I'd be in the back, stirring the pozole and making sure the walk-in cooler didn't freeze overnight. They came because I came, every single day. My kids, well, they were around. Carlos, my oldest, 32 going on 19, lived upstairs and still treated every problem like something he could figure out later. Miguel, the middle one, spent more time planning his wedding with Brooke than figuring out how to help me run the kitchen. And Isabella, my baby girl, 27 and still convinced she was going to be discovered on TikTok for being relatable. They all lived with me, ate from my fridge, slept in rooms I paid to keep warm. Not one of them ever offered to cover the linen service or check the supply order. They talked big, especially Carlos. Told friends we were a family business, that he was next in line. But when the ice machine broke last summer, guess who fixed it with duct tape and prayer? Me. And when payroll was short 3 times in a row, I maxed out my credit card so my staff could get paid on time. But I never said a word. I just kept showing up. I figured maybe one day they'd look up from their phones and say, "Thanks, Mom, let me take it from here." That day never came. I remember one morning, last fall, maybe September. I was up early, chopping onions before the lunch prep started. Carlos walked into the kitchen shirtless, sipping one of those overpriced smoothies and scrolling his phone. "You good for the mortgage this month?" he asked casually, like he was checking the weather. I froze. My hands were wet with onion juice, the blade halfway through a yellow onion. I didn't look at him, just said, "I'll figure it out." He nodded, then left the room. Didn't ask why I hesitated. Didn't say thank you. I checked the bank account that afternoon. Negative $184. I'd paid the electric, the phone, the food supplier. I hadn't even bought groceries for the house yet. That night, I skipped dinner. No one noticed. Miguel and Brooke were laughing in the living room, scrolling through Pinterest boards for the wedding. Isabella was filming herself in the bathroom mirror. Carlos was in the garage, yelling into his headset about NFTs or day trading. I stopped keeping up. I sat on the edge of the couch and said, "Guys, we need to talk." Nobody looked up. I raised my voice. "I can't cover the mortgage this month." Silence. Miguel muted the TV. Isabella walked in holding a green matcha latte, blinking like I'd interrupted her enlightenment. And then Carlos said something that still rings in my ears. "I think it's time we talk about long-term housing solutions." Long-term housing solutions. Like I was a problem. Like I was an elderly tenant, not their mother. You see, this isn't just a revenge story. This is the kind of story where a woman realizes, after decades of sacrifice, that no one is coming to save her. And worse, the people she spent her life saving? They're the ones who'll hand her the eviction notice. But I didn't cry then. I didn't scream. I just nodded. And the next morning, I packed a small bag, my apron, my checkbook, my wedding ring. I hadn't worn it in years, but I couldn't leave it behind. I walked out of the house I paid for with kids I raised and a restaurant I kept alive. Not because I wanted to, but because for the first time in 30 years, I knew they weren't going to change. Mariana picked me up in a dusty Camry with a cup of gas station coffee and 2 words, "It's time." And just like that, I left the life I built behind me, not because I lost, but because I finally saw what I'd spent a lifetime refusing to believe. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who once called you mom. I should have seen it coming. I mean, it wasn't like Carlos was ever subtle about wanting to modernize the business. He'd been floating ideas for months, adding QR code menus, changing the name, bringing in investors. At first, I thought it was just him trying to feel useful. He liked saying he was co-owner, but he never showed up before noon, never filled out a single order sheet, never once stayed late to close with me. Still, I let him talk. I nodded through every half-baked pitch about food trucks and ghost kitchens, because that's what moms do. We give them space to grow even when it makes no damn sense. But nothing prepared me for that envelope. It was a Tuesday. Lunch had been slow, and I came home early, hoping to finally get some rest. I walked into the living room and saw all 3 of them, Carlos, Miguel, Isabella, sitting on the couch like they were hosting an intervention. Brooke was there too, perched on the armrest like a smug little consultant. I should have turned around right then. Carlos stood up and handed me the envelope. "There's something we need to talk about," he said. I opened it. 10 days, a signed eviction notice from all 3 of them. The reason? Emotional strain and financial instability. I blinked. "You're kicking me out of my own house?" Brooke tilted her head like she was talking to a confused patient. "No, Linda. We're giving you a chance to focus on your peace." Peace. That word hit harder than any slap. I had scrubbed that stove for 30 years, covered payroll with my own credit, stayed up all night making tamales so Miguel could have his college tuition. And now they were handing me a notice like I was some squatter, like I was a burden. Carlos said, "It's not personal. We've just been talking, and we think it's time for a change." "You forged my name to open a new branch," I said quietly. He flinched, but didn't deny it. Isabella crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic. You always act like we owe you something." That was it. That sentence, the one that cracked something in me, because no, I didn't want repayment. I never asked for applause or a parade. All I ever wanted was to be seen, to be valued, to be remembered when the food hit the table and someone asked, "Who made this?" I locked myself in my room that night. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, just sat there with the eviction notice in one hand and my wedding ring in the other. I hadn't worn it in years, but it felt like the last piece of who I used to be. The next morning, I started packing. Clothes, old recipe notebooks, a framed photo from the early days of Moreno's kitchen, the one where all 3 kids were still small, holding mixing spoons, smiling like we were happy. That photo hurt more than the notice. I left the house without saying goodbye. Mariana was waiting in the car. She didn't ask what happened. She knew. She just handed me a cup of coffee and said, "You're coming with me. You're not staying one more night in that place." And I didn't. We don't talk enough about the quiet part of betrayal. It's not the yelling or the door slams. It's the silence after. The cold breath of realizing no one is coming to knock. No one is coming to say, "We made a mistake." I sat on the spare bed in Mariana's guest room, my suitcase unopened, my hands in my lap. Everything smelled like lemon cleaner and soft towels. Nothing like home. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't even feel angry. Just erased. Let me pause here a second and ask you, whoever's listening, have you ever given so much to someone, your time, your money, your whole heart, and then one day they looked at you like you were in the way? Because if you have, then you already know. It's not the rejection that cuts deep. It's the way they act like it never cost them anything to erase you. If that's ever happened to you, if you've ever sat in a room you didn't choose, holding pieces of a life that used to be yours, I want you to know, you're not weak. You're not wrong for feeling broken. You're just at the part of the story where the fire starts. I stayed quiet for 3 days, didn't touch my phone, didn't check the bank account, until one morning Mariana came in holding a letter. It was from the credit agency. My name My social security number, the amount, $10,000, taken out 6 months ago under the business name, signed with my name. I dropped the letter. I hadn't applied for a single loan in years. Carlos had used me. He didn't just kick me out. He used my name to fund his little expansion project, and now that it was failing, he dumped me like a bad investment, left me holding the bag. That night, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow and cruel above me. I didn't cry, because crying, that would have been too easy. Instead, I did something else. I got up, I opened my old notebook, and I started writing down the one thing they could never fake. The thing they tried to steal but never could replicate. My recipes. You ever feel like a ghost in your own life? That's how I felt waking up in Mariana's guest room. Nothing on the walls, no smell of pozole in the air, no prep list waiting for me, just silence. And that lemon-scented floor she'd mopped at dawn, thinking it would comfort me. It didn't. I used to mop my kitchen floor every Sunday morning, before the sun came up, before my kids opened their doors, before customers filled the dining room. I'd be on my knees, scrubbing the same tile I laid with my husband 25 years ago. It was the only time the house felt quiet, felt mine. Now I was in a house that wasn't mine, wearing clothes that still smelled like flour and grease, and trying to convince myself I hadn't lost everything, even though, deep down, I knew I had. I didn't unpack. Didn't even take the clothes out of the trash bags. Every time I looked at them, I felt like I was looking at a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Like I'd stolen someone else's story, and now the universe was taking it back. Mariana tiptoed around me for days, trying not to crowd me, but not letting me disappear either. She offered to pay the $18,000 debt Carlos had dumped on me. I told her no. She already gave me her roof. I wasn't taking her wallet, too. I started applying for jobs, anything with a kitchen and a sink. Bakeries, diners, food trucks. Nobody wanted a 66-year-old woman with no formal resume and arthritis in both hands. Just years of scars and burnt fingertips. They looked past me, like I wasn't worth the paperwork. One day, Mariana handed me a flyer for a Korean diner looking for kitchen help. Cash preferred, part-time. I didn't ask questions. I put on my cleanest blouse, brushed back my gray hair, and showed up. The manager didn't look at me, just said, "Start now," and pointed toward the sink. That first day, I washed dishes until my back locked up. I sliced onions with a dull knife until my fingers turned raw. No one spoke to me. They giggled when I dropped a plate. A teenager called me abuela behind my back like I didn't know what it meant. But I came back the next morning, and the next, because I wasn't looking for kindness. I was looking for something real, something mine, even if it came in the shape of a dirty pot and frozen peas on my wrists at night. On the 5th day, a customer asked who made the soup. The chef, Mr. Kim, pointed at me with his chin and kept chopping. That was it. No compliments, no applause. But the next day, he let me prep the broth again. That was enough. Meanwhile, I didn't ask about my kids, didn't check their socials, didn't wonder how the business was doing. But Mariana couldn't help herself. One evening, she sat across from me with her phone and said, "They're using your recipes." I didn't understand at first. Then she turned the screen. There it was, a reel from Moreno's kitchen. Isabella giving a kitchen tour while Brooke narrated some new family fusion menu. I watched as she walked past my stove, my walls, my cutting board, explaining my mole, my empanadas, my poes tamales like she invented them. Every dish had my handwriting in it, every spice, every garnish. They hadn't just erased me, they'd kept the food and scrubbed the name. I clenched my jaw, but said nothing. Let them try. Let them stand in my kitchen and act like they belonged. They didn't know how to handle the rush on Fridays, didn't know that the walk-in cooler stuck on the left side, didn't know that the second burner flared up if you turned it too fast. They could copy the dishes, but they couldn't cook like me. A few nights later, I took the long way home from the diner, ended up walking past Moreno's kitchen by accident, or maybe not. The lights were still on. The sign still said, "Family owned since 1993. But the energy was wrong. It smelled like truffle oil and cheap perfume, like a place trying too hard to impress people who don't understand flavor. I stood across the street behind a telephone pole, just watching. Carlos was pacing in a suit he couldn't afford. Brooke was adjusting the lighting for a photo shoot. Isabella posed by the host stand like it was a film set. None of them looked like they belonged in a kitchen. None of them noticed me. I felt like a ghost, watching the life I built wear a stranger's face. The next morning, Mariana handed me an envelope. No return address. Typed. Cold. A formal document stating that Linda Moreno had relinquished her financial and physical involvement in Moreno's kitchen. Attached to it? A breakdown of pending reimbursements, including $183 for groceries I bought before being kicked out, and $120 in cleaning fees related to my departure. They invoiced me for living in my own kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded the letter and tucked it in my purse. Because one day, I'd need it. Not for revenge, but for proof. Proof that I was once there, that I existed, that I built something, and that when they tried to erase me, they only made me stronger. They thought they'd close the book on me. But really, they wrote my prologue. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped hoping they'd call. Maybe it was the day I saw Carlos post a photo in my kitchen. My stove, my apron still hanging behind him like a trophy. And he captioned it, "Legacy never dies." Legacy. I remember staring at that word for a long time. He didn't mean me. He meant himself. He thought he was the legacy. That's when it hit me. They weren't trying to destroy me. They were trying to replace me. And somewhere along the way, I'd let them. I'd spent 30 years making sure everything around me stayed afloat. The business, the bills, the kids. And in the process, I forgot how to swim for myself. For weeks, I'd been waking up just to survive. Clock in, wash dishes, go home. But something shifted after that letter. Not the kind of shift you see in movies. No dramatic music or big speeches. Just a slow, stubborn ache in your chest that finally turns into clarity. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want forgiveness. I just wanted my life back. One night after work, I stayed behind at the diner. The kitchen was closed, the floor still damp from mopping. I pulled out an old receipt from my apron pocket and started writing, not a resignation letter, not a plea, a recipe. Birria sliders with mole glaze and pickled onions, something I'd thought about years ago but never had time to test. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up scribbling in the margins of takeout napkins and utility bills. Dishes I'd always wanted to try. Combinations that didn't make it onto the Moreno's kitchen menu because Carlos thought they were too ethnic. I wrote them down anyway. Mariana found the stack of notes the next morning and said nothing. She just read through them one by one and then looked at me like she'd seen a light flicker back on. "You're not done," she said. "I don't have a kitchen," I told her. She handed me a spare key to her garage. "You do now." We cleaned that garage with vinegar, elbow grease, and prayer. I borrowed pans from the diner, bought a secondhand burner from a guy on Craigslist, tested sauces at 2 a.m. in a hoodie and slippers. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I got that eviction letter, hungry, not just for food, for meaning. I still worked my day shift at the diner, still iced my wrists at night, but every evening I'd come home and build. Quietly, privately, stubbornly. I didn't tell Mr. Kim, didn't post anything online, didn't even mention it to my kids. It wasn't a comeback, it was a return to myself. Eventually, we scraped together enough money to borrow an old food truck from a friend of Mariana's. It had one working burner, a leaky roof, and wheels that squeaked like a sad accordion. But when I stepped inside, something clicked. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. We parked near a construction site the first day, hoping for foot traffic. By 2 p.m., we were sold out. The next day, a college student made a TikTok video about the abuelita with fire tacos. It hit 600,000 views in 2 days. Lines started forming. Mariana handled the cash box. I cooked like my life depended on it, because it did. Every tortilla I flipped, every spoon of mole I served was a reminder that I still had value, still had flavor, still had fire. We named it Linda's Revival, not because I wanted attention, but because that's what it was, a revival. Not a revenge tour, not a comeback campaign, just a quiet reclaiming of the woman I'd forgotten under the weight of everyone else's needs. Mr. Kim eventually found out. He showed up at the truck one night after close with a brown envelope. I opened it, $15,000 in cash. "You saved my kitchen," he said. "Now save yours." I tried to refuse. He didn't let me. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a pass. Don't waste it." So I didn't. I used every cent like it mattered, got the licenses, paid off the truck loan, filed the LLC paperwork, everything in my name. This time, there were no shortcuts, no borrowed favors, no Carlos, just me. And the menu I built at midnight when nobody was watching. I still saw my kids pop up online now and then. Isabella made another video about toxic parenting. Carlos posted some fake quote about resilience. Miguel reposted a photo from our old restaurant with the caption, "Building from the ground up." I didn't comment, didn't call, didn't correct them, let them build their stories. I was too busy building mine. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you. Sometimes starting over doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means starting from truth. And the truth is, I was never a burden. I was never too much. I was just never allowed to take up space. Now I was taking it, one plate at a time. Some people make a comeback with balloons and banners. Me? I made mine with a busted burner and a menu written on the back of a grocery receipt. Linda's Revival wasn't shiny. We had no influencers, no soft launch, no PR team, just word of mouth, and a line that stretched down the sidewalk by week 3. People didn't come because of a story. They came because the food felt honest. It was the kind of food that made you want to call your mom, even if she didn't answer anymore. I didn't post my story online. Didn't tell anyone about the eviction or the debt or the betrayal. I just cooked, because that's what healed me. Not justice, not revenge, just the steady rhythm of the kitchen, the chop of the knife, the hiss of the oil, the comfort of routine. I didn't realize how far I'd come until one night, a woman stood outside the truck crying over a bowl of mole. She said it tasted like her grandmother's. And just like that, I remembered why I started cooking in the first place. It wasn't to build a legacy. It was to make people feel at home, even when they weren't. Of course, my kids noticed, eventually. They didn't reach out, not directly, but Mariana overheard things. Carlos was maxing out credit cards trying to keep their version of the restaurant alive. Isabella posted a video about being misunderstood that barely hit 1,000 views. Miguel and Brooke had canceled the wedding twice. I didn't say anything. Didn't gloat, didn't watch. I just worked, because I knew something they didn't. You can't copy flavor if you don't understand where it came from. Then came the permits, or more specifically, the problems with the permits. First a random inspection, then a fine, then a suspension, all for violations that didn't exist. My paperwork was clean. My fees were paid. I spent 2 weeks running from office to office, holding my folder like a shield. Told customers we were doing routine maintenance, even when I was crying in City Hall bathrooms between line numbers. Then one night, a woman came by the truck just before closing. She didn't order anything. She looked nervous, kept glancing around, said she was a friend of Brooke's, said she overheard something at a wine mixer, that Brooke had connections at the council, that she'd bragged about making life difficult for someone who stole her restaurant identity. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. I thanked her, closed the window, sat on the cooler and stared at my hands until they stopped shaking. They weren't just done with me. They were threatened by me. My quiet success embarrassed them because I'd done what they couldn't, survived, thrive, alone. The next day, I walked into a rundown strip mall 2 blocks from our usual route. Empty unit, old bakery, grease trap intact. I signed the lease that afternoon. Didn't ask for advice, didn't tell my kids, didn't even tell Mariana until after. "Why here?" she asked, looking at the cracked tile and flickering overheads. "Because it's mine," I said. We scrubbed that place with toothbrushes and vinegar, painted walls with cheap rollers, watched YouTube videos to learn how to patch drywall, ate dinner sitting on overturned milk crates. Mr. Kim helped me pick out the stove. A teenager from church designed the logo for free. We opened on a Wednesday morning with no sign but a handwritten "open" taped to the window. By the end of the week, we had a line out the door. Customers came for the food, stayed for the feeling. I remembered their names, their allergies, their stories. One man brought his daughter 3 days in a row. A woman cried over a tamale. A college student asked to intern just to learn how to care about food like you do. I didn't need Yelp stars or influencers. I had people, and people talk. One afternoon, a customer leaned over the counter and said, "I used to eat at Moreno's. It's not the same anymore." I nodded, passed him an extra dipping sauce. Didn't say a word. Let them figure it out. 3 weeks later, I saw it. A food truck parked directly across from me. Same colors, same font, same menu. Carlos. He didn't even try to hide it. He was running it himself, blasting reggaeton like it was a club. People came by, looked at both, and always came back to me. Some laughed. One woman even said, "Nice cosplay," before ordering 2 mole bowls and tipping 40%. I didn't engage, didn't retaliate, but I documented everything. Took photos, kept receipts, filed it all under a folder labeled evidence. Because here's the part my kids forgot. They never filed a full ownership transfer. They never bought me out. Legally, I still held part of Moreno's kitchen. They thought they erased me, but they just gave me time. A week later, I sat with a lawyer, showed him everything. The fake signatures, the forged documents, the invoices, the proof of menu theft. He looked at me and said, "You have a case and you have power." I filed a notice, not to take revenge, but to take back my name. Sent it to their landlord, to their suppliers, to the health department. 3 certified letters, same subject line. Eviction notice. This time, it was from me. I didn't expect silence to feel so loud, but that's what happened when Moreno's kitchen got shut down. Not a bang, not a headline, just a notice on the door, a blank Yelp page, a voicemail box that no longer accepted messages. I didn't gloat, didn't even smile. I just flipped the "open" sign at Linda's Revival and kept rolling tortillas, because I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in peace. 3 days later, they came. No phone call, no text, just the sound of the door opening mid-shift and a gust of air that smelled like shame and old cologne. Carlos walked in first, shoulders hunched, eyes puffy like he hadn't slept. Miguel followed, looking at the floor. Isabella came last, mascara smudged, lips pressed tight. I was refilling the tamale warmer when I saw them. I didn't flinch, didn't greet them. I just said, "If you're not here to order, you're blocking the line." The man behind them chuckled. They stepped aside. Carlos spoke first. "Mom, can we talk?" I turned slowly, wiped my hands, and leaned on the counter. "Talk about what?" Miguel mumbled, "We messed up. We know we did." I nodded once. Carlos cleared his throat. "But you can't just ruin us." I looked at him like a stranger. "You think this is ruined? No, this is consequences. You're just finally standing in it." Isabella whispered, "Is there anything we can do to fix it?" I let that hang in the air, then said, "There's work, if you want it. Back of house, minimum wage, no title, no family discount. You show up early, you scrub, you follow rules, just like I did, for 30 years while you watched." Carlos looked like he wanted to scream. Miguel blinked fast. Isabella turned pale. I didn't move. "The aprons are in the back," I said. "Clock and sheets on the fridge." Then I turned away and took the next customer's order. They didn't move for a full minute. Then quietly, they walked out. The next morning, they came back. 6:47 a.m. No makeup, no swagger, just tired sneakers and quiet desperation. I unlocked the door, stepped aside, and pointed. "Clock's in the fridge. Apron's on the hook. You're late." They mumbled apologies. I didn't respond. This wasn't a reunion. It was an onboarding. That first day, a disaster. Carlos broke 2 plates. Miguel sliced his finger and nearly fainted. Isabella froze when a customer asked for no dairy and gave them cheese. They looked at me for rescue. I gave them towels. No praise, no pity, just work. By the end of week 2, something shifted. Miguel started prepping early. Carlos stopped sighing every time I gave an order. Isabella wrote things down instead of pretending she remembered them. They stopped asking for exceptions, stopped flinching when corrected, started showing up, and for once, not as my kids, as workers. I watched Carlos rinse out a trash bin without being asked. Miguel rechecked inventory twice. Isabella stayed late to wipe tables. None of them asked for recognition. They just did the work. That was new. That was enough. 3 months in, I handed each of them a folder. Clean contracts, real job descriptions, shares in the business. Carlos stared at his. "You're serious?" I nodded. "You've earned it, but I'm still majority. Don't get cocky." Miguel swallowed hard. Isabella looked like she might cry. I didn't hug them, just said, "If you miss 2 shifts without notice, you're out." They all nodded. No pushback, no excuses. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about rebuilding a family. It was about building something that might last longer than blood. The grand reopening happened a year later. New floors, new signage, a bigger kitchen, a framed photo of the original Moreno's kitchen staff on the wall. We kept the name Linda's Revival, not because I needed to be front and center, but because revival doesn't mean returning to what was. It means rising again, differently. That night, after the last table was cleared and the lights were low, my kids stood in the kitchen waiting for me to tell them what to do. Instead, I handed Isabella the keys. "You're closing tonight," I said. She didn't flinch. She just nodded, and that's how I knew. They weren't perfect, but they were becoming useful. That night, I walked home to the little condo I share with Mariana, made tea, sat on the couch, put my feet up, watched a video Isabella had posted to the restaurant page, just a time lapse of the dinner rush. Carlos flipping tortillas, Miguel plating with steady hands, me in the back laughing at something a customer said. The caption? "She built it. We're just catching up." And for the first time since the day they handed me that eviction letter, I cried. Not from pain, but from relief, from release, from knowing. I didn't need to be thanked. I just needed to be remembered.